Spectral Convergence, a fan fiction short story by Jason M. Bramble. This work is a fan creation, and all characters, settings, and elements from the Doctor Who and Ghostbusters franchises belong to their respective owners, such as the BBC and Columbia Pictures. No infringement of copyright or trademark is intended. This story is not associated with, endorsed by, or sponsored by the creators or producers of Doctor Who or Ghostbusters. It is created purely for entertainment and does not seek any profit. All original content, including new characters and plot elements, is the author's creation.
Chapter 1. The Vanishing Researcher. The night settled over New York City, casting long shadows across the cityscape. The historic museum stood like a silent sentinel in the heart of the city, its grand facade illuminated by the occasional flicker of streetlights. Inside, the museum was a labyrinth of darkened corridors and silent exhibits, the air thick with the weight of history. Dr. Eleanor Bishop, a respected researcher and curator, sat hunched over her desk in the dimly lit research wing. The faint glow of her desk lamp cast eerie shadows on the walls, creating a ghostly dance of light and dark. The museum was silent, save for the occasional hum of the security monitors and the soft scratching of Dr. Bishop's pen against paper. She glanced up at the statue placed in the center of the room. This ancient relic had been unearthed during her recent archaeological dig at Wester Drumlins, an old house in London with a reputation for being haunted. The statue had angelic features and haunting expressions that sent a shiver down her spine. Dr. Bishop picked up her tape recorder and began documenting her observations. "The statue is remarkably lifelike," she said, her voice echoing slightly in the empty room. "Its expression is unnervingly realistic, and there is an unsettling aura surrounding it. It's almost as if it's watching me." She paused, glancing at the statue again. An inexplicable feeling of dread washed over her. Despite the museum's strict security measures, she couldn't help but feel vulnerable, as though something sinister lurked in the shadows. As she turned back to her notes, a faint glimmer caught her eye. She leaned closer, her breath catching in her throat. Pink slime was oozing from the base of the statue. Her mind raced, recalling the recent news reports of this slime being found in the sewers. The descriptions of the pink slime matched what she saw before her. "Ugh, what is this?" she whispered, reaching out to touch the substance. It was cold and viscous, sending a chill through her fingers. She wiped her hand on her lab coat, her heart pounding. "I need to report this. The collection must have gotten contaminated." She fumbled for her phone, intending to call the museum's security team. As she dialed the number, a chilling wail pierced the silence. Dr. Bishop spun around, her eyes widening in horror. The statue was no longer stone. It had transformed into a ghostly form, its eyes glowing with malevolent intent. The room seemed to darken as the creature advanced toward her, its spectral form undulating with a sickly glow. Dr. Bishop stumbled back, her hand searching for something, anything to defend herself. She knocked over a stack of books, the loud thud echoing through the room. "Stay back!" she shouted, her voice trembling. The ghostly figure ignored her command, its cold, ethereal hand reaching out. Desperation gripped Dr. Bishop as she grabbed a nearby artifact, a heavy bronze vase, and hurled it at the apparition. The vase passed through the ghost harmlessly, clattering to the floor. "No," she whispered, her voice filled with terror. The ghostly figure moved closer, its presence oppressive and suffocating. She could feel her strength waning, her life force being drained away. In a final act of defiance, Dr. Bishop lunged for the security alarm, her fingers brushing against the button, but it was too late. The ghost's touch sent a surge of energy through her body, and she felt herself fading, her form becoming translucent before vanishing entirely. In a matter of moments, Dr. Eleanor Bishop was gone, erased from existence as if she had never been there. The next morning, the museum sprung to life with the arrival of guards and staff, all oblivious to the harrowing events of the previous night. The grand halls echoed with the bustling activity of employees preparing for the opening of the newest exhibit. Curators and assistants moved with purpose, adjusting displays, checking lighting, and ensuring every detail was perfect. Their faces beamed with excitement, completely unaware that Dr. Eleanor Bishop had ever been involved with the exhibit. As the morning wore on, the museum staff carried out their routines with practiced efficiency. No one noticed the absence of Dr. Bishop. Her office, once a hub of meticulous research, was now eerily empty. The shelves that had held her carefully organized notes and personal items were bare. There was no sign that anyone had ever occupied the space. All advertisements and promotional materials for the exhibit had mysteriously been altered. Dr. Bishop's name, which had been prominently featured, was now conspicuously absent. Her contributions to the exhibit were erased as if she had never existed. Her name was not uttered by any of her colleagues, who went about their tasks without a second thought. The statue she had worked so tirelessly to study remained in its place, silent and unmoving. Its angelic features and haunting expressions stood in stark contrast to the lively atmosphere of the museum. No one seemed to notice the subtle shift in its presence or the faint aura of menace that clung to the air around it. A small residue of pink slime lingered on the floor near the statue, unnoticed by the busy staff. It glistened briefly in the morning light before being wiped away by the custodians, its significance lost on those who cleaned it. There was no evidence left of the terrifying events that had transpired, no trace of the supernatural horror that had claimed Dr. Bishop. Everything seemed as it should. The exhibit was getting ready for public viewing. Chapter 1 end. Chapter 2. The Timey-Wimey Warehouse. Inside the TARDIS, the atmosphere was one of serene contemplation. The console room, bathed in the warm, ambient glow of the central column, hummed with the quiet energy of the ancient machine. The 12th Doctor leaned back in a chair, his boots propped up on the edge of the console. He had just returned from a particularly long summer on a planet full of beaches, a rare respite in his usually tumultuous life. As he sipped a cup of tea, a series of alerts suddenly flashed across the TARDIS monitors. The Doctor frowned, setting his cup down and leaning forward. "Unusual temporal and ectoplasmic readings," he muttered, scanning the data. The readings were converging on one specific point in space and time: New York City, 1990. The Doctor's brow furrowed in thought. "That's curious," he said to himself, tapping a few buttons on the console. The TARDIS responded with a series of beeps and whirs. "Let's have a closer look, shall we?" With a flick of a switch and a decisive turn of a lever, the TARDIS roared to life, the central column rising and falling rhythmically as it prepared for takeoff. The Doctor adjusted his coat and checked the readings one last time. New York City, 1990, here we go. The TARDIS materialized with its familiar groaning wheeze, landing in a bustling evening Manhattan street just as the sun was setting. The Doctor stepped out, adjusting his dark coat and taking in the scene. The city was alive with energy, people rushing to and fro, neon lights flickering to life as the day gave way to night. He pulled out his sonic screwdriver, scanning the area. The device buzzed and whirred, but the readings were erratic. "Something is interfering with the signal," he muttered, trying to fine-tune the settings. Despite the interference, he managed to fix a location based on the temporal energies emanating from the disturbance. The Doctor made his way through the crowded streets, the sonic screwdriver guiding him to a large, unassuming warehouse on the edge of the city. The building was old and weathered, its exterior giving no hint of the secrets it held within. He pushed open the heavy door and stepped inside, his footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. The interior of the warehouse was dimly lit, the scant illumination provided by a few flickering bulbs hanging from the high ceiling. Shadows danced ominously across the rows upon rows of wooden crates and metal boxes. The air was thick with dust and the stale scent of old, forgotten things. The Doctor moved cautiously through the labyrinth of stored artifacts, his sonic screwdriver held out in front of him, its soft blue light casting an eerie glow. As he turned a corner, he froze. Stacked against the far wall were dozens of statues, weeping angels. Their faces, contorted in expressions of sorrow and rage, seemed to glare at him from the darkness. "Well, that's not good," the doctor muttered, his eyes narrowing. He stepped closer, the sonic screwdriver buzzing frantically in his hand. But something was different about these angels. The readings were unlike any he had seen before. Nearby he heard the sound of footsteps echoing through the cavernous space. Security guards. The doctor quickly ducked behind a crate, peering out cautiously as 3 guards approached the scene, their flashlights cutting through the gloom. "I swear I heard someone," one of the guards said, his voice tense. The doctor's heart pounded as he watched them, hoping they wouldn't notice him. Just then, something caught his eye. One of the statues began to shimmer, the stone exterior seemed to liquefy, peeling away to reveal a ghostly, ethereal form beneath. The doctor's breath caught in his throat as he realized what was happening. The angel was somehow evolving. A security guard, lagging behind the others, came into view. He glanced nervously at the statues, a shiver running down his spine. "Man, these things are fucking creepy," he muttered. The ghostly angel turned its gaze upon him, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. Before the guard could react, the spectral angel reached out, its ethereal hand passing through the man's chest. The other 2 guards screamed in absolute horror, their faces pale with fear. The guard's eyes widened in terror as his life force visibly drained away. His skin grew ashen, his features gaunt. In moments, he vanished, dissolving into the air as if he had never been there. The spectral angel vanished as well, leaving only the faintest trace of pink slime where the guard had stood. The doctor watched in disbelief as the remaining guards looked around in confusion. They had clearly witnessed the horror, yet they did not run. One of them called out, his voice oddly calm. "Why are we even out here? Nobody is going to steal this junk. Let's get back to the guardhouse." With that, the 2 men retreated calmly into the darkness, their memories of the event already fading as if it had never happened. The doctor remained hidden, his mind racing. This was worse than he had imagined. The angels had evolved into something far more dangerous. The doctor hurried over to the spot where the guard had disappeared, kneeling down to examine the faint residue of pink slime left behind. He could feel it. This pink slime was somehow involved. He scooped up a sample, carefully sealing it in a vial. "I need to get this back to the TARDIS," he murmured, standing up and glancing around the warehouse one last time. He needed to get back to the TARDIS and figure out how to stop them before it was too late. As he made his way back to the TARDIS, the doctor's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of information he'd gathered. The transformation of the weeping angels was a dire threat, and the presence of the pink slime only complicated matters further. What connection did this ectoplasmic residue have to the angels? Was it merely a byproduct of their evolution, or something more sinister? Stepping outside, the doctor was greeted by the cool evening air of New York City. The streets were alive with the bustle of pedestrians, the honking of cabs, and the distant wail of sirens. He paused for a moment, taking in the chaotic harmony of the city, before his attention was drawn to a nearby electronics store. In the window, a row of televisions displayed the same channel, each screen flickering with a colourful and somewhat absurd commercial. "Who you gonna call? Ghostbusters?" the TV blared, the jingle upbeat and catchy. The ad showed a group of eccentric-looking men in jumpsuits wielding peculiar equipment and battling various supernatural entities. The scenes shifted rapidly, showcasing their recent triumph over Vigo the Carpathian, interspersed with clips from what was clearly a low-budget advertisement. Despite the crude production, the doctor couldn't ignore the sense of urgency and competence that emanated from the Ghostbusters. "Well, that's a bit on the nose," the doctor mused aloud, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "Ghostbusters, eh? Never heard of you, but you might just be the help I need." He didn't believe in coincidences, and the fact that he had stumbled upon this commercial at such a critical moment felt almost like a nudge from the universe. The doctor's curiosity was thoroughly piqued. He'd encountered countless extraordinary beings and organizations in his travels, but the Ghostbusters were entirely new to him. If they had managed to handle such supernatural threats with apparent success, perhaps they could aid in addressing the evolving menace of the Weeping Angels. With the vial of pink slime safely tucked away in his coat pocket, the Doctor quickened his pace, weaving through the throngs of people. His long coat billowed behind him as he moved with purpose, his mind already forming a plan. The Ghostbusters' expertise in the supernatural might be the key to understanding and combating the spectral convergence threatening New York City. As he approached the TARDIS, the Doctor couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. He unlocked the door with a flick of his wrist, the familiar hum of the TARDIS's interior greeting him as he stepped inside. The console room was a comforting chaos of dials, levers and screens, the heart of his ship pulsating with a warm, golden glow. The Doctor set the vial of pink slime on the console, watching it bubble and shimmer under the lights. "Right then," he said to himself, fingers dancing over the controls, "let's see what we're dealing with here." He activated the TARDIS's scanning systems, directing the sensors towards the slime. The readings were complex, a swirling mix of temporal and ectoplasmic energy. It was as he feared. The slime was not just a byproduct but a catalyst, enhancing the Weeping Angel's ability to feed on time and making them even more dangerous. The Doctor's brow furrowed in concentration as he processed the data. "This is worse than I thought. The slime is amplifying their powers, creating a feedback loop that's destabilizing the temporal field around the city." He straightened, determination gleaming in his eyes. Time to pay these Ghostbusters a visit. Locking the coordinates into the TARDIS, the Doctor prepared for his next move. Chapter 2. Chapter 3. Angelic Interruption. The Ghostbusters Firehouse HQ was alive with celebration. The iconic building, with its red brick facade and large garage doors, had become a beacon of hope for the citizens of New York. Inside, the team reveled in their recent victory over Vigo the Carpathian. Laughter echoed through the halls as they shared stories of their battle, toasting to their success. Peter Venkman lounged on a couch, a smug grin on his face, as he recounted his bravest moments. "And then," I said, "Vigo, you're toast." And bam, right in the kisser, he boasted, raising his glass. Egon Spengler, always the scientist, adjusted his glasses and added, "Let's not forget the readings we got from the slime. It was highly reactive to our proton streams." Ray Stantz, bubbling with excitement, nodded vigorously. "Absolutely. The way it responded to our equipment was fascinating. We need to analyze that more." Winston Zeddemore, the practical one, chuckled. "As long as it means we get to keep New York safe, I'm all in." Their celebration was interrupted by the shrill ring of the emergency hotline. Janine Melnitz, their ever-efficient secretary, picked up the phone. "Ghostbusters HQ, Janine speaking." "Uh-huh. Yes. Okay, we'll be right there." She hung up and turned to the team. "We've got a call. Haunting at the historic museum. Sounds like a routine job." It was early morning when the Ecto-1 roared through the streets of Manhattan, lights flashing and sirens blaring. The Ghostbusters arrived at the museum, greeted by the nervous staff who were eager to see their problem resolved. The team wasted no time unloading their equipment and heading inside. The museum's grand halls were eerily quiet, the only sound being the faint hum of their proton packs. Their footsteps echoed softly on the marble floors as they split up, each member scanning their assigned areas for any signs of paranormal activity. Ray Stantz and Egon Spengler found themselves in the dinosaur hall, their flashlights casting long shadows on the massive skeletons. The towering bones of ancient creatures loomed over them, creating an almost otherworldly atmosphere. Ray's PKE meter beeped softly, indicating a nearby ghostly presence. "Standard globulous blob in the dinosaur hall," Ray muttered, holding up the meter for Egon to see. "Should be easy enough." "Famous last words," Egon replied dryly, adjusting his proton pack. "Remember the last easy job we had?" Ray chuckled nervously. "Yeah, point taken. Let's just get this over with." As they moved deeper into the hall, their flashlights illuminated the T-Rex skeleton's gaping maw and towering frame. The shadows played tricks on their eyes, but the PKE meter's readings grew stronger. They spotted the globulous blob ghost oozing between the bones, its amorphous form shifting and glowing faintly in the dim light. "There it is," Egon said, raising his proton wand. "Ready, Ray?" "Ready," Ray confirmed, tightening his grip on his own proton wand. They both fired their proton streams, the beams of light arcing through the air and ensnaring the ghost. The blob screeched, its form pulsating as it struggled against the streams. Slowly they pulled it toward the trap Ray had placed on the floor. "Come on, you slimy bugger," Ray muttered through gritted teeth. "Into the trap you go." "Reminds me of the time we had to chase Slimer through the hotel kitchen," Egon remarked, his voice strained with effort. "Yeah, except this time we don't have a chef chasing us with a meat cleaver," Ray replied, a grin spreading across his face. As they maneuvered the ghost closer to the trap, a sudden movement caught their eyes. An angel-like spectral entity emerged from the shadows, its form glowing with an ethereal light. It moved with an unsettling grace, its eyes fixed on the blob ghost. "What the hell is that?" Peter Venkman called out, joining them with Winston Zeddemore. His eyes widened at the sight of the new entity. "Looks like an extra from a Renaissance painting gone wrong." Before they could react, the spectral entity attacked the blob ghost, absorbing it in a burst of light. Peter quipped, "Wait, did a ghost just steal our business?" Ray, clearly taken aback by what he saw, tried to capture the entity with his proton stream. "It's slipping through," he shouted, his frustration evident. Egon threw a trap, hoping to contain the entity. The trap briefly held it, but the readings on Egon's meter alternated wildly between full and empty. "Something's wrong with the trap," he noted, adjusting his equipment. "Why does it feel like every piece of equipment we have is on the fritz today?" Winston muttered, his eyes never leaving the ghost. Ray fumbled with the trap, trying to stabilize it. Come on," he urged, his hands shaking slightly. Suddenly the trap burst open and the entity escaped with such force that they were all knocked over. "Great, now what?" Winston groaned, picking himself up off the floor. Ray and Egon exchanged concerned looks. "That wasn't just any ghost," Ray said, his voice tinged with worry. "There's something bigger going on here." "We need to get back to HQ and analyze this data," Egon added, dusting himself off. "This is beyond anything we've encountered before." Peter, always the one to lighten the mood, cracked a grin. "Well, at least we don't have to worry about the blob ghost anymore. One less thing to clean out of the proton packs." "Hey, Egon," Peter said, glancing over his shoulder. "Think we can put ghost-stealing angel things on the business cards?" Egon sighed, but a small smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Let's figure out what we're dealing with first, Peter." They sped through the streets of New York, the sirens of the Ecto-1 wailing a warning to any who would listen. The Ghostbusters were on the case. Chapter 3. End. Chapter 4. First Contact. The Ghostbusters returned to their firehouse, the Ecto-1 pulling up to the curb with a squeal of brakes. The iconic vehicle's siren trailed off as it came to a stop, the lights flickering before dimming. The team was weary but alert, the recent encounter with the spectral entity still fresh in their minds. They exited the car, their gear clinking and creaking, ready to unload and wind down from the eventful day. As they approached the firehouse, a peculiar sight caught their attention. Parked right in front of the entrance was a strange blue box. Its weathered wooden exterior contrasted starkly with the modern surroundings of New York City. Ray was the first to speak, his voice tinged with curiosity and confusion. Guys, I think someone left a phone booth on our doorstep." Winston leaned closer, squinting at the box, his brow furrowed as he read the words printed on the top. "Wait a minute, this isn't just any phone booth. Look at the writing. It's from the UK. Police public call box?" The Ghostbusters exchanged puzzled glances. Before they could speculate further, the door of the blue box swung open with a creak, and out stepped the Doctor. His dark coat billowed slightly in the breeze, giving him an air of dramatic entrance. He looked around with a mix of curiosity and determination, his sharp eyes taking in the surroundings. Peter rolled his eyes, a look of exasperation crossing his face. "Great. Fame and fortune always brings out the nuts. Ray stepped forward, his natural curiosity getting the better of him. "Who are you?" The Doctor approached them with a confident stride. "Ah, Ghostbusters. Just the people I was looking for. I'm the Doctor." "The Doctor of what exactly?" Ray asked, crossing his arms. "Time, space, everything," the Doctor replied with a grin. "But right now, I'm specializing in this." He gestured to the TARDIS behind him. "And I'm very interested in your ghost-catching technology." Peter smirked, glancing at his teammates. "Told you. Fame and fortune always brings out the nuts," he repeated under his breath. Egon, always the scientist, couldn't help but engage. "You're interested in our proton packs and storage containment." "Precisely," the Doctor exclaimed, his enthusiasm palpable. "The technology you're using is quite extraordinary. I'd love to see how it works in detail." Ray exchanged a cautious look with the others, a hint of skepticism in his eyes. "This is really fascinating, Doctor, but we don't usually trust people we just met, especially ones who pop out of blue boxes." The Doctor pulled out his sonic screwdriver and activated it, the device emitting a soft whirring noise as it scanned their suits. "Would it be fair to ask if you've recently had a spiritual experience? Perhaps encountered some angels?" Egon stepped forward, eyes narrowing. "How do you know that? And you are Doctor Who?" The Doctor responded with a smile, his eyes twinkling with intrigue. "Follow me for your answer. I think it's important that you see something." He led them to the TARDIS and opened the door wide. "Step inside." Peter glanced at the open doorway, then back at Ray. Ray, would you like to be the first to enter our new friend's potential death box?" With that, he led them to the TARDIS and opened the door. "Step inside." Peter quips, Ray, would you want to be the first to enter into our stranger's death box?" Ray laughs and pushes him in. Skeptical but curious, the Ghostbusters followed the Doctor into the TARDIS. As they crossed the threshold, their jaws dropped in unison. The interior was impossibly large, filled with advanced technology and an array of instruments that defied explanation. The vast, cathedral-like space was bathed in a warm, golden light, the hum of alien machinery providing a strange but comforting background noise. The central console stood like a command center, covered in levers, buttons, and screens displaying incomprehensible data. Peter was the first to break the silence. "Okay, this is definitely not a phone booth." Egon's eyes lit up with keen interest as he took out his PKE meter and began taking readings. The device beeped rapidly, its needle jumping wildly. "This technology is incredible. It's far beyond anything I've ever seen." Ray looked around in awe, his eyes wide with wonder. It's bigger on the inside." Winston shook his head, trying to wrap his mind around what he was seeing. "Man, this is something else. How is this even possible?" The Doctor, now having their full attention, began to explain. "The threat we're facing is far more dangerous than any ghost you've encountered. The entities you saw are called weeping angels. I've encountered them before. They are not ghosts, but rather quantum-locked entities." The Ghostbusters listened intently as the Doctor continued. "But these angels have evolved. They're different from the ones I've encountered previously. Now they can absorb not just time energy, but also ectoplasmic energy, making them even more dangerous. They seem to be erasing their victims from the very timeline itself, absorbing all the potential time energy that would have existed. The pink slime you've encountered is amplifying their abilities, providing a conduit outside of their normal quantum-locked states and creating a feedback loop that's destabilizing the temporal field around the city." Egon's brow furrowed as he absorbed the information. "Time energy? Can you clarify how they're absorbing it and what exactly is happening to their victims?" The Doctor nodded. "Traditionally, weeping angels feed by sending people back in time. They consume the energy of the days those people would have lived. It's a parasitic relationship with time. But now, with the pink slime, they're able to interact with ectoplasmic energy too. This means they can affect ghosts and other paranormal entities, not just living beings. Ray, his curiosity piqued, leaned in. So, this feedback loop you mentioned, how is it destabilizing the temporal field? And why is the pink slime so crucial in this process? The pink slime acts as a conductor, amplifying their abilities, the Doctor explained. It enhances their power to manipulate time and space, creating a sort of resonance. This resonance is causing temporal distortions, making time unstable around them. Essentially, it's like throwing a rock into a calm pond. The ripples spread out and disrupt everything. Winston, always the practical one, asked, "But what happens to the people they erase? Are they gone for good?" The Doctor's expression turned grim. Yes, unfortunately. When the angels erase someone now, they're not just sent back in time. Their existence is wiped out completely. No trace, no memory, nothing. It's as if they never existed at all. Egon looked up from his readings, his face serious. "If what you're saying is true, then we need to find a way to neutralize this threat before it gets out of hand." Ray nodded, his expression determined. "We're going to need all the help we can get." Peter, still trying to wrap his head around the concept, asked, "So how do we stop these things? What do we need to do to cut off their power?" The Doctor smiled, his eyes gleaming with determination. "First, we need to analyze the data on these spectral angels. Then, we'll devise a strategy to neutralize their power and restore the temporal balance. But we'll have to work together. This threat is too great for any of us to handle alone." As they stood in the TARDIS, the Ghostbusters realized the gravity of the situation. They were about to embark on a mission that would test their skills and knowledge to the limit. The fate of New York City, and possibly the world, hung in the balance, and they were the only ones who could stop the spectral convergence, threatening to tear apart the fabric of time itself. Ray looked around at his team and then back at the Doctor. "All right, Doctor, we're in. What do we do first?" The Doctor nodded appreciatively. "We'll start by analyzing the pink slime samples and tracking the temporal distortions. With your technology and expertise in handling paranormal activity and my knowledge of time and space, we have a fighting chance." Egon adjusted his glasses, a determined look in his eyes. "Let's get to work then. We've got a city to save." With that, the Ghostbusters and the Doctor prepared to tackle the greatest challenge they had ever faced, united by a common goal and driven by the desire to protect the world from an unimaginable threat. Chapter 4. Chapter 5. The Rush into Battle. Back in the firehouse, Ray and Egon worked with the Doctor to recalibrate the proton packs and trap frequencies, increasing power outputs. Oscilloscopes displayed fluctuating waveforms while Egon fine-tuned the energy output, and Ray meticulously soldered new components onto the proton packs. The lab was a flurry of activity, with sparks flying and equipment humming as they made the necessary adjustments. The Doctor looked at Egon and concluded, "So the issue here is that these angels require constant supervision to remain in their quantum-locked state. Without that, it's a bit of a Schrödinger's cat situation. The best solution is to create a feedback loop within your trap that constantly measures the quantum energy state of its contents. If the state changes, it alerts you immediately. It's essentially the equivalent of keeping an eye on the prisoner at all times." Just then Peter walked in, returning from his surveillance at the museum. He was still brushing dust off his jacket, remnants of his sneaky endeavors. "Guys, you need to see this," Peter announced, holding up a flyer he had grabbed from the museum. The room's frenetic energy momentarily paused as everyone turned to him. "Here's the deal, guys. The new angel exhibit is opening to the public in 2 nights with a big gala. These statues were shipped over from some old place in London called Wester Drumlins." The Doctor's face went pale, recognizing the name immediately. Wester Drumlins was notorious for its connection to the Weeping Angels, a fact that only heightened his urgency. "That's what they're waiting for," he said urgently, his voice filled with both fear and determination. "We have to move now." Ray interjected, "Well, wait, we know we have one angel in the museum. Doctor, you said how many more were in the warehouse?" The doctor replied, "I saw at least 3 others there." Ray, thinking methodically, said, "Well, would it make sense to test out the new settings on the single angel first? I don't know about any of you, but I want to be methodical about this." Egon nodded in agreement. "Yes, I would find it most unfortunate if I didn't exist." Winston voiced a practical concern. "I just have one question. How do we plan on getting into the museum? That place is locked up tight." The doctor smiled knowingly. "You know, I do more than just travel in time." At the museum, silence reigned like a thick, oppressive blanket. The sounds of a grand clock chimes out 3 a.m. Shadows danced eerily in the dim light as the TARDIS whirled into existence, with its familiar whooshing sound materializing out of thin air. The heavy wooden doors creaked open, and the Ghostbusters stepped out cautiously, their proton packs humming softly in the eerie stillness. The air was cold, carrying the faint scent of dust and old stone. The doctor took the lead, his sonic screwdriver glowing faintly in the darkness. The soft, rhythmic beeping of their equipment seemed amplified in the silence, echoing off the walls. Their footsteps were hushed, but still sounded unnaturally loud, each step sending a jolt of tension through the group. The flickering lights cast long, wavering shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. As they navigated the dimly lit corridors, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. Ancient artifacts loomed on either side, their shapes barely discernible in the gloom. The eyes of long-forgotten statues seemed to follow them, adding to the creeping unease. The doctor knew that any one of these could be an angel, and proceeded cautiously. Approaching the research wing, they found the single angel statue standing ominously under a dim spotlight. The statue's stone features were frozen in an eternal scream, a look of terror and anguish etched into its face. It seemed almost alive in the play of light and shadow, its eyes fixed on some unseen horror. "All right, let's see if this works," the doctor whispered, his voice barely more than a breath, as if afraid to disturb the oppressive silence. Ray nodded and aimed his proton pack at the statue, the hum of the pack growing louder in the quiet. He fired a concentrated stream of energy, the bright beam cutting through the darkness and striking the angel. Nothing happened. "Nothing," Ray muttered, frustration and a hint of fear creeping into his voice. The stillness of the statue seemed even more unnerving after the burst of light and sound. The shadows deepened, and the sense of dread grew stronger. The doctor glanced around, feeling the weight of unseen eyes on them, and the Ghostbusters tightened their grips on their equipment, ready for whatever might come next. "Try together," the doctor urged. "Winston, Ray, both of you." They both fired simultaneously, their streams intertwining and enveloping the statue. Still, the angel remained motionless. Peter, watching from the side, suddenly had an idea. "Hey, Ugly!" he shouted at the statue. "Yeah, you. I've seen garden gnomes scarier than you." He took a step closer, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Is that supposed to be a scary face? I've seen scarier faces on potatoes." The others paused, glancing at Peter with curiosity and amusement, but also a sense of growing tension. "Seriously, who carved you? They must have been having a laugh. I've seen better craftsmanship at a kindergarten art show." Peter circled the statue, continuing his verbal assault. "You call yourself an angel? More like a stone pigeon. I've had scarier encounters with my morning coffee." A small droplet of pink goo suddenly seeped from the base of the statue, catching Peter's eye. He smirked, sensing he was onto something. "Oh, look at that, the pigeon's crying. What's the matter? Did I hurt your feelings?" The doctor's eyes widened, seeing the goo. "Keep going, Peter, it's working." Peter, emboldened, ramped up his insults. "What? Are you going to fly away now? Oh, wait, you can't, because you're a useless hunk of rock. I've seen statues in parks with more life than you." Another droplet of pink goo oozed out, and then the statue's eyes flickered with a menacing glow. The angel began to stir, its stone limbs creaking as it started to come to life. The doctor, Ray and Winston readied their proton packs, tension palpable in the air. "Oh, now you're moving. Took you long enough. I've seen snails with more hustle." Peter continued, not letting up for a moment. "What's next? You going to do a little dance for us? I bet you can't even boogie." The angel fully awakened, its stone facade shifting into a more fluid, menacing form. It moved with a jerky, unsettling grace, its eyes locked on Peter, who took a cautious step back. "All right, everyone, now," the doctor shouted. The team sprang into action, their proton streams crisscrossing as they tried to contain the angel. It was fast, dodging and weaving with unnatural agility. "Keep it steady," Egon instructed, adjusting his aim. "We need to trap it." The doctor screamed, "And don't let it touch you!" The angel darted between the beams, its movements a blur. Peter, thinking quickly, continued his barrage of insults, keeping the angel's attention divided. "You call that a scary face? I've seen scarier in a funhouse." Winston managed to get a solid hit, his stream locking onto the angel. "I've got it!" he shouted. "Egon now," Ray called out. Egon threw the trap, sliding it across the floor. "Everyone clear," he ordered. With a flash of light and a loud zap, the trap opened, pulling the angel inside as it released a horrible screech. The lid snapped shut, and the room fell silent once more. Ray picked up the now sealed trap, feeling a brief sense of relief. But then a sudden sound broke the silence, a shrill beeping that echoed through the dark museum. Everyone looked around, panic flickering in their eyes. Egon glanced down and realized it was his PKE meter going crazy, the device's lights flashing wildly. Guys, we've got a problem," he said, his voice tight with tension. The doctor pulled out his screwdriver, the device buzzing and whirring as he scanned the area. His expression darkened as he read the escalating signals. "Oh no," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Then louder, with a sense of urgency that sent chills down everyone's spine, he shouted, "Run! To the TARDIS!" The team bolted down the dimly lit corridors, their footsteps echoing off the marble floors. The shadows seemed to twist and move around them, and the air grew colder with every step. As they reached the main hall, they could see the TARDIS, its familiar blue shape a beacon of hope in the darkness. Suddenly, bright lights flashed outside the museum windows, circling ominously. The faint sound of stone scraping against stone grew louder, echoing in the vast empty space. Egon glanced back, his face pale. "There must be hundreds of them," he shouted. The team sprinted towards the TARDIS, hearts pounding, the sound of their breathing loud in their ears. Just as they reached the door, a loud crash reverberated through the museum, the building shaking violently. They stumbled inside, the doctor slamming the door shut behind them. The TARDIS rocked, clearly under attack from the outside. The doctor frantically manipulated the controls, his face set with determination. "They can't get in here," he assured them, though his eyes betrayed his concern. He threw a lever, and with a familiar whoosh the TARDIS dematerialized, leaving the haunted museum behind. Suddenly everything stopped. The rocking ceased and the deafening crashes fell silent. An eerie stillness enveloped them, plunging the TARDIS into a haunting quiet. End of Chapter 5. Chapter 6. If at first you don't succeed. As the team stood around after their narrow escape, each tried to collect their wits. Winston was the first to break the silence. "What the hell was that?" The doctor, the first to speak, replied, "That, my friends, was the sound of hundreds of angels awakening all at once. They were coming for us. In my past encounters, weeping angels have been nearly indestructible, time-locked assassins, but now their new spectral form has revealed a weakness. They can be captured in your traps, a fact they're just now realizing. For the first time, we saw them react with fear." Winston followed up, "Well, can they follow us?" And the doctor shook his head. "I think not. I took us away from Earth entirely. We're hovering on the dark side of the moon in a single moment." He checked his console. "Everything seems clear." Winston furrowed his brow. "A single moment?" The doctor nodded. "Yes. Time moves in here, but not out there. We are in a bubble of sorts." Ray, not fully listening, muttered, "Hundreds? I thought we could handle 2 or 3, but hundreds? How can we do that? These things are strong." The team looked discouraged. Well, most of them. Egon continued to pace the interior of the TARDIS, taking readings in deep concentration. Peter broke the tension with a smirk. "Well, maybe I could go down and sing them a lullaby." The Doctor turned to Peter, curious. "Wait, Peter, that reminds me. How did you know to insult the statue?"
Peter shrugged. "It's the pink goo."
Ray's eyes widened. "Oh my God, that's right. This thing is powered by pink goo. It's got to respond to it." The Doctor, looking puzzled, said, "I'm not quite following. This is sort of a first for me." Ray nodded. "It's sort of an inside thing. We first encountered this slime during our battle with Vigo the Carpathian. It responds to emotions and has some rather peculiar properties." Egon elaborated. "It's psychomagnetheric slime. Essentially, it can be positively or negatively charged based on emotional energy. The angels are manipulating this aspect by feeding on negatively charged emotions, which amplifies the slime's ability to interact cross-dimensionally." The Doctor's eyes lit up. "So at a sufficiently charged level, it allows the angels to leave their quantum-locked state." Ray added, "We've seen this slime allow ghosts to cross dimensions when sufficiently charged with negative emotion." Egon nodded. "Yes, but they need to get it to a sufficient charge. They just need to inspire hate, or more likely, fear." Peter, looking serious, said, "I just saw one of those things. I don't think that fear is a problem." The Doctor nodded thoughtfully. "That makes sense. We inspired a strong fear. Their collective fear brought them to life in a spectral form." Egon interjected, "But we can counteract it just like we did with Vigo." Ray suggested, "Music?" The Doctor echoed, "Music." Egon confirmed, "Yes, music with positively charged emotions seems to work." Peter, ever the skeptic, quipped, "Well, let's hope this box has a sound system." The Doctor looked thoughtful, then decisive. "We can use this, weaken them in their apparitional state." Egon then asked, "Also, Doctor, how far does this temporal bubble extend?" On a dark, cloudy night, the TARDIS materialized outside the old museum's warehouse, hidden away behind a bush. The night was thick with an ominous silence, broken only by the distant rustling of leaves and the occasional hoot of an owl. Inside the TARDIS, the Doctor helped Egon and Ray make a few final adjustments on the proton pack, the air heavy with anticipation. "Now that we have an actual angel within the trap, we were able to get precise readings on its spectral frequency," the Doctor commented, his voice low and intense. "It should be a lot easier to hold them." Winston, standing in the dim light, added, "And with that quick stop by the firehouse, we have enough firepower to take out a legion." Ray slung a proton pack over his shoulder, determination etched on his face. "So all we have to do is wait. This will be a cinch." Peter cracked a rare, tense smile, the shadows playing on his face. "If by cinch you mean wire up the entire warehouse with traps, lure those things back here, and hope they don't non-exist us." Egon nodded, his eyes scanning the equipment one last time. "We're as ready as we'll ever be. It's about time." Peter glanced at his watch, the tension evident in his voice. "What's the local time?" Egon replied, 3:20 a.m. We should be trapping the angel right about now." Suddenly a bright light flashed outside, piercing the darkness. Windows shattered, sending shards of glass scattering as hordes of spectral angels descended upon the museum, their eerie wails echoing through the night. Peter's smile grew even tenser. "I'd call that a sign." The Doctor's expression hardened, his eyes narrowing with determination. "It's time. Let's move." Under the cover of darkness, the team crept into the warehouse. The Doctor and the Ghostbusters moved cautiously, their proton packs humming softly in the eerie silence. The dim light cast long, distorted shadows on the open, empty boxes and crates that once contained angels of all forms. The air was thick with tension and the faint scent of decay. Winston, Ray, and Egon moved swiftly, laying traps throughout the warehouse with a central trip line running into the main office. The TARDIS had been discreetly relocated inside the office, its blue glow casting an ethereal light in the gloom. As they neared the main hall, the doctor whispered, "We need to act quickly. The angels will eventually sense us, especially after the other us leaves." Peter managed to get the old PA system operational in the office, which came to life with a crackle. Everyone winced as Peter muttered, "Sorry, sorry." Ray and Egon approached the doctor. Ray said, "I think it's showtime." The doctor nodded, "Good luck," and entered the TARDIS, shutting the door behind him. From the echoes of sound outside the warehouse and through the broken windows, they could hear the unsettling scraping of stone and the ominous crackling of glass at the nearby museum. The Ghostbusters each took a position in and around the main office, their nerves on edge, ready for what they knew was coming. Ray whispered under his breath, "Go for it, Doctor. Let them know we're here." Inside the TARDIS, the Doctor activated a frequency emitter, broadcasting the signal of the trapped spectral angel. The device hummed with a sinister energy, its vibrations resonating through the air. Suddenly, all sound outside stopped. The oppressive silence was broken only by the distant howl of the wind, which seemed to carry whispers of dread. Then came a shift in the air, a chill that made the hairs on the back of their necks stand on end. The temperature dropped, their breath visible in the frosty air. It didn't take long before an intense, unearthly light pierced the darkness, moving towards the warehouse with malevolent intent. A horde of spectral angels wailed as they approached, their ghastly forms breaching the broken windows and pouring into the building like a torrent of malevolence. Their eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and their stone wings scraped against the walls, creating a cacophony of dread. The Ghostbusters remained hidden, every muscle tense, waiting for the signal. The warehouse seemed to swell with spectral energy, the air thick with an almost tangible menace. Shadows twisted and writhed on the walls, and the feeling of impending doom was palpable. Using a Walkman plugged into the PA system, Peter started playing "The Lion Sleeps Tonight." The song echoed through the warehouse, its cheerful melody a stark contrast to the horror that surrounded them. The ghosts began to slow, their ethereal forms reacting to the positive music infused with pink goo. "Is it me, or do these things actually look uglier up close?" Peter quipped, his voice barely masking his fear. Ray smirked nervously. "Just think of them as very aggressive lawn ornaments." Then, abruptly, the screams silenced. The chaotic movements of the spectral angels slowed to a near crawl as the Doctor engaged the temporal bubble. The air shimmered with the energy of the bubble, distorting the angels' forms and holding them in a temporal stasis. The Ghostbusters stepped out from their hiding places, their proton streams crackling to life with an ominous hum. They moved with precision, their faces set with grim determination. They lassoed each spectral angel one by one, dragging them into the center of the temporal distortion created by the TARDIS. Each Ghostbuster was careful to stay outside the bubble's influence, their eyes darting nervously as they worked. "Let's wrap these statues up before they turn us into their next art exhibit," Winston muttered, focusing his aim. The angels struggled, their forms flickering between stone and ghostly apparitions. Their eyes, filled with rage and fear, followed the Ghostbusters' every move. The warehouse echoed with the sounds of battle, the proton streams crackling and hissing as they restrained the spectral beings. Finally, when they were satisfied with the lineup, Ray gave the signal. He triggered the trap array, and with an elongated, agonized screech, the entire building lit up with electrified bolts of lightning, capturing the entities. The air was filled with the smell of ozone and the flicker of bright light, casting stark shadows that danced wildly on the walls. As the last of the light faded, Peter turned off the PA system. Silence fell once more, deeper and more profound than before. The team stood amidst the wreckage, their breaths coming in heavy gasps. The warehouse, now eerily quiet, bore the scars of the battle they had just fought. "Well, that was a walk in the park," Peter said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "A park filled with murderous statues, that is." "Next time, can we fight something that doesn't come to life when you look away?" Ray added, wiping sweat from his brow. "Just be glad we didn't have to do the Macarena to trap them." Winston joked, though his relief was evident. They knew they had faced an unimaginable horror and emerged victorious as they exchanged glances, their eyes reflecting the gravity of their encounter. Chapter 6. Chapter 7. Farewell. The sun was beginning to rise, casting a warm glow over the city that had just survived an encounter with an ancient terror. The firehouse stood tall against the morning light, a beacon of resilience. Outside, the Doctor and the Ghostbusters gathered, their faces marked with exhaustion but also with a sense of triumph. The TARDIS, its blue exterior still bearing the marks of the night's battle, hummed softly in the background. The Doctor leaned against it, looking at the Ghostbusters with a mixture of fondness and respect. Ray adjusted his proton pack and sighed with relief. "We did it! We actually did it!" Winston nodded, a rare smile breaking his usually stoic expression. "And we couldn't have done it without you, Doctor." Peter, always the joker, tried to lighten the mood. "So, Doctor, ever thought about a career in ghostbusting? We could use a guy like you." The Doctor chuckled, shaking his head. "Tempting, but I think I'll stick to saving the universe in my own way." He paused, his expression turning serious. "But if you ever find yourselves in need of assistance again, don't hesitate to call. I'll be there." Egon stepped forward, his analytical mind already pondering the possibilities. "The technology you've showed us, Doctor, it's amazing. My head is spinning with the possibilities." The Doctor smiled and nodded. "You're a remarkable team, and the world is safer because of you." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared experience hanging in the air. The city was waking up, unaware of the dangers that had been averted in the dead of night. Finally, the Doctor stepped back towards the TARDIS. "Well, I suppose it's time I was off. Places to go, times to see." The Ghostbusters watched as he opened the door, the familiar sound of the TARDIS's engines filling the air. Ray couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. "Will we see you again?" The Doctor smiled, his eyes twinkling with the promise of future adventures. "Time will tell, Ray. Time will tell." With a final wave, the Doctor stepped inside, and the TARDIS began to dematerialize. The sound of its departure echoed through the morning air, leaving behind a sense of peace and possibility. The Ghostbusters stood there, watching until the TARDIS had completely vanished. Peter broke the silence, his voice filled with a mix of awe and determination. "Well, that was something. What do you say, guys? Ready to face whatever comes next?" Winston clapped a hand on Peter's shoulder. "Always." Egon adjusted his glasses, already thinking about the enhancements they could make. "With what we've learned, we'll be ready for anything." Ray nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "Let's get back to work." As they turned and walked back into the firehouse, the city came to life around them. They knew there would always be threats, but they also knew they had the strength and the knowledge to face them. The firehouse door closed behind them, and the Ghostbusters prepared for a new day. The end.